Hiya, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
You want to go do a podcast?
Sure.
Jump in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barbies and Kens, Chelseas of all ages, and everyone else, welcome to Considering Christopher, a Christopher Nolan podcast. I'm your host, John, and with me I have my co-host. Well done, lad. Well done.
All we did was podcast.
That's enough. This week we are talking about Nolan's 10th film, Dunkirk.
Yep, we're moving backwards, so just did Tenet last week. Going backwards through his filmography, Memento style here.
Yep.
Yeah,
Dunkirk.
this is... Yeah, released in July 21st, 2017. Directed by Christopher Nolan, obviously, and he also wrote the film. Starring Finn Whitehead, Tom Hardy, Mark Rylance, Barry Keoghan, Harry Styles, Kenneth Branagh, and quite a few other people. We have cinematography by Hoyte van Hoytema and music by Hans Zimmer. This is the first Zimmer score we're talking about.
And also the last one for Nolan.
Didn't Zimmer did Interstellar?
But that's...
I see.
Yes.
You're going not in podcast order, but in actual order.
So the last one that Zimmer did before Ludwig van Beethoven took over.
Yeah. So yeah, this was and Nolan had the idea for this film way back in the 1990s. Are you familiar with the story behind this?
Vaguely.
Yeah, so it's based on the actual historical event of Dunkirk, which was a battle which we'll get into, but essentially a bunch of troops were rescued from the French beaches when English and British boats came and rescued them, and not just military boats, but also civilian boats.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this was major event in especially British history, very well known event. And so Nolan actually had the idea for this movie in the 1990s. He took a boat trip with his wife, Emma Thomas, who's a frequent producer on his films. And they went from England to Dunkirk, and he had the idea to make a movie about the actual battle. But he waited quite a few years until he felt like he had enough experience as a director to make it. I think also waiting until he had enough sort of cachet to
Do whatever he wants. Yeah.
Do his vision of the story. And yeah, the filming took place in the UK, the US, the Netherlands, and France. They actually filmed on Dunkirk, the actual beach, as well as a nearby town, because the city of Dunkirk was destroyed in World War II. So the shots that are actually in the town are a different town that was left standing somewhat after World War II. And yeah, for this production, they used as little CG as possible. They employed old VFX tricks, including cardboard cutouts and scale models.
We know how that works.
Yep. Yeah, this was incredibly well received upon release. Some critics have called it Nolan's best.
Wow.
It was, I mean, it is a very critic friendly film, I think. And it was nominated for a ton of awards, including 8 Oscars. That includes Best Picture and Best Director, Christopher Nolan's first and so far only Best Director nomination at the Oscars.
That's crazy.
I mean, when you look at the list, though, there aren't... The only other Nolan film that was even nominated for Best Picture was Inception. So then it makes a little bit more sense.
Right, but like, you'd think his other films would go up there, because I love a lot of his other films, so...
I mean, he's almost certainly getting another nomination for Oppenheimer, maybe even a win.
I mean, sound design for sure, hopefully.
Yeah. But yeah, Dunkirk actually won both of the sound design Oscars at the 2018 Oscars, and then it also won editing. So yeah, it's the story. It is split into three different timelines, taking place across different time frames. So
Mm-hmm.
the first one is 1 week. I think it's titled "The Mole."
Yes.
Um, and it follows Tommy, who's a British soldier trying to get out of Dunkirk, and he befriends a quiet fellow soldier named Gibson. The two try and board a convalescent ship, but are turned away since they aren't actually injured. And when it sinks, they join the survivors on a different ship and befriend another soldier named Alex. That ship is hit by torpedoes, and the three soldiers are picked up by a lifeboat and
Mm-hmm.
end up back on Dunkirk Beach, where they join a group who board a grounded merchant vessel, hoping to ride it out when the tide comes in. As they wait, some German soldiers show up and shoot holes in the hull, causing it to fill with water. And so they have to drop weight in the boat. So the group votes to throw out Gibson, who it turns out is a French soldier who took a British soldier's uniform to try and get out of Dunkirk. But before they throw him out, the boat starts floating, but it eventually sinks and Gibson drowns.
Mm-hmm.
Or not Gibson, but the person wearing Gibson's uniform. Um,
Yes. Codename Kids.
yeah, and then we are following. I tried to follow somewhat the chronological order, though not entirely. But the next plot line is the 1 day plot line. I forget what that one's titled. Is it?
It's probably the sea or something.
Yeah. Um, so there we're introduced to Dawson, who's the owner of a small yacht, who has decided to sail to Dunkirk to help with the evacuation rather than have his boat commandeered. And he is joined by his son Peter and their hand George.
Mm-hmm.
And on their way to Dunkirk, they rescue a shell shocked soldier who survived the shipwreck. The soldier wants them to turn around and gets in a bit of a scuffle with Dawson, um, and accidentally knocks George down the stairs, killing him. He hits his head on like a metal thing. But rather than turn back, Dawson decides to carry on to Dunkirk. And then we have the 1 hour storyline. This is what's happening in the air above
Mm-hmm.
the channel. And we have Ferrier and Collins, they're two RAF pilots sent out to aid with the evacuation. Collins' plane is damaged during the dogfight and he crashes into the channel. But Ferrier decides to continue on even though his fuel gauge is damaged and he can't see how much fuel he has left. Collins is picked up by Dawson piloting the yacht, so that's those two storylines kind of crossing there.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, ships carry and civilian vessels arrive at Dunkirk and begin rescuing survivors. Um, Near Dunkirk, Ferrier gets into a dogfight with a bomber that is trying to drop bombs onto a British ship. The ship starts sinking, and Dawson and his yacht arrives in time to help pull survivors out of the water. This includes Tommy and Alex from the first plotline, whose boat sunk nearby. So they get picked up and rescued. And then Ferrier in his plane takes down the bomber and continues on to Dunkirk. He runs out of fuel but is able to shoot down a plane that was targeting the mole, and he crashes his plane and sets it on fire and is captured by German soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dawson's boat arrives back in England, and Alex is worried that he will be seen as a coward for retreating, but instead the survivors are met with a celebration, and the movie ends with Tommy reading out Churchill's address to the country the morning after Dunkirk.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there I kind of tried to go a little bit in chronological order because the three stories are interspersed with each other in a way that is a little bit hard to follow, especially the first time around.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You don't really the first time you watch it, you don't really think about how connected they really are. So you
Yeah.
think it's like, oh yeah, they just do their own thing. That's pretty cool. And it's not really until rewatches where you start to notice like, oh, that was them at that point. Oh,
Yeah.
that's how that connects, and it's like, okay, it's a lot more interesting upon rewatch. But yeah, no, the story is pretty basic. It does what it needs to do for a war film, and that's about it.
Yeah, I do think the three individual stories are actually pretty compelling.
Yeah,
We have the first one, which is for the most part almost entirely dialogue free,
yeah,
which
which is
is
interesting.
this soldier trying to get off the beach and sort of the relationships he forms with the soldiers around him.
Hmm.
Um, then we have the boat story, which is these civilians risking their lives to save people, and it almost becomes like a microcosm where you have this shell shell shocked soldier who shows up and is I don't know, it feels very sort of poetic rather than literal, if that makes sense.
I guess, yeah,
Where it's less of like I don't know, there's something interesting about that plot line and how it feels more it's more thematically deep than the other two plot lines.
sure.
Um and then yeah, you have the third plot line, which doesn't have as much sort of plot to it, but you do have this interesting idea of an aircraft pilot who doesn't know how much fuel he has left and yet
Hmm.
continues on. Sort
And
of
really,
each
he's the
encounter.
only one who has the ability to stop the enemy.
Yeah.
And you see him constantly fail to do so throughout the film until the end.
Yeah. And yeah, even just like each encounter, he's using more and more of his fuel, and he knows that as well.
Hmm.
Sort of this dilemma that he and yeah, it is interesting. These are all small scale dramas happening in the midst of this big historical event.
Hmm.
It is worth noting all of these plot lines are fictional and all of these characters are fictional, but they are based within the reality of Dunkirk, and this is a very heavily researched film.
Yeah, like you can believe that these sorts of stories happened,
Yeah,
and they probably likely did happen. Like there's a lot of untold stories and the wars in general,
yeah,
and so I do really appreciate like seeing different aspects of war films or war TV shows. So
okay. I'm not as big into war media just because I think the message that they tend to go for is war is bad. And I'm like, okay, I agree, but what else are you trying to say? And
yeah,
war is bad. Okay, yes, yes, but what else? What's more? I
yeah,
think that's especially like the All Quiet on the Western Front adaptation, the recent one. Um, but I think Dunkirk has more going on and is more tightly constructed than the average war film.
hmm,
It is one of Nolan's shorter films,
yeah,
despite having sort of three very distinct plot lines. It's under 2 hours long.
yeah. I remember it being longer, but yeah, no, it's a pretty easy watch because it's shorter than most of his other films. So
Yeah. Easy in terms of length, not necessarily easy in terms of content.
sure, sure. I mean, easier for me because I'm used to war stuff. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, this is interesting as sort of a war film. This isn't the most gruesome or the most existentially depressing.
right. Because that's not the point.
Yeah. But it still does get you in that mindset.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like it doesn't have the epic battle scenes that you'd see from Saving Private Ryan or The Band of Brothers or just any other war film that you can think of in general. Here, it's like okay, that stuff already happened. This is afterwards,
Yeah.
them trying to get out, which is something that you don't really see a whole lot of representation of.
Yeah. And even the story of Dunkirk is very cinematic. The idea of these civilians coming to the rescue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm surprised there aren't more Dunkirk movies. There have been a couple, and there's been as well. It's been a plot point in other movies. I think most interestingly, Darkest Hour, which is a biopic about Winston Churchill during World War II, which came out the same year as Dunkirk and was also nominated for Best Picture. And there is a moment um, in Darkest Hour where you could pause that, go and watch Dunkirk, and then continue Darkest Hour and like have an experience of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Dunkirk is focusing in very intentionally on you aren't seeing the bigger war.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing just this very specific moment of it.
Which is very refreshing.
Yeah. Now, I will say we should probably talk a bit about the non chronological structure.
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least, but
Yeah. Now, personally, I feel that the way it is constructed takes me out of the movie every time I rewatch it. There's a lot of cross cutting between scenes, especially early on when it's, we have this story of this soldier who is going through this war and experiencing and trying to survive. And then it'll cut. Okay, now we're on Dawson's storyline with his yacht. Oh, and now we're on the airplane storyline. It's
mm-hmm.
like you lose some of the continuity of the emotional arcs going on there.
Right. Especially towards the end, where they're starting to cut more in between the three
Yeah.
as events started ranking up. There's a moment where we're on the mole and you hear a plane coming and like the music is start getting intense, but then it cuts away
Yeah.
and you lose that intensity. It's like, oh, it's not as strong. Another comparison is there's a different edit. They don't cut away to a different spot, but there's an edit in I don't know if you remember the initial teaser trailer for this film that came
Yeah.
out, where you just have the soldiers just sitting quietly and you hear the planes coming in and they start ducking. Um, however, that sequence in here, there's a cut in between them ducking, and they just show a shot of the plane coming in and firing, which
Yeah.
takes away the power of the shot from the soldiers' perspectives, which is a shame because I really like that shot from the trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some odd editing choices overall. It's difficult to keep track of which story is happening at which point.
Yeah, the most confusing part is killing Murphy's character
Yeah.
because like we first see him when he's rescued by Dawson, but then you see him in the flashback, a quote unquote flashback with Tommy and Gibson,
Yeah.
and he is on a small boat, but we never got to see how he got onto that ship and how he ended up there, and the timeline that we're given doesn't make sense for him to be there. Because like
Yeah.
there would have been a whole other ship that he would have gone on, and we never saw that happen.
Yeah. Which I think is fine, but it does kind of take you out of the movie when you're trying
It's
to.
yeah, on rewatch it makes no sense, and that
Yeah.
kind of takes me out. But yeah,
Yeah. It's interesting. There is this sort of made waves back when it initially came out, but someone actually did a chronological edit of the movie,
mm-hmm.
um, sort of a fan edit, and I was able to find it pretty easily. I was surprised. It's called Dunkirk, I believe. Time Stands Still, and no, unfortunately I didn't get a chance to watch through it. I didn't remember it until after I'd already rewatched Dunkirk. I did watch sort of bits and pieces, but it is sort of interesting to think about, and I can imagine having just seen Dunkirk what it would look like, which is you have the first 40 minutes are entirely the Tommy and Gibson storyline. So you get through most of that storyline and you get to them back on the beach after the ship gets torpedoed. You get all the way there, and then you start to introduce then you introduce Dawson, and that completely changes the feel of that storyline, because now you've been living on Dunkirk for 40 minutes and now you have someone coming in to save them. And then a little bit further down you get the the farrier and Collins, and you get them now coming into the story probably 15, 20
Yeah,
minutes later.
and I can understand why Nolan uh, cut it the way he did, because he wants you to be invested in all three characters from the get go,
Yeah.
instead of like, okay, now I had to be invested in a whole another main character 2/3 of the way in.
Yeah.
And I get that, and it's part of his signature to just tell things in a non-linear order. Um, and it makes it interesting for rewatches, of course. But yeah, no, it's something.
Yeah. And you think even of the Killian Murphy character, his arc, where you see him very briefly early on in the movie, and then when he shows up later, if you're doing a chronological watch through of it, like you get the sense for that arc a lot better than if you start with him in the as the shell shock person and then you cut back to him before that happens.
Hmm. Yeah, because you see him struggling, and then you get to see him before. You want to see how he got into that situation,
Yeah.
and so doing it in the traditional sense gets rid of that aspect.
Yeah. And I would almost bet that while editing this movie, and I believe it's edited by Jennifer Lame, who has done several other Nolan films, as well as Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story, sort of connection back to Barbie. Um, but I would bet that there is a chronological edit that was produced by the team behind this movie, and that they looked at that and then they looked at the non-chronological edit, and probably Nolan decided, hey, let's go with the non-chronological.
Yeah,
But I would be curious to hear the reasoning behind that.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, because it's non-linear, it stands out more. Because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is non-linear. Oh, that's interesting. Versus it's like, oh, it's just your normal war story with different aspects. Like one of them makes you more intrigued than the other, and that's probably why Nolan went that route than just the traditional route.
Yeah. And I mean, Nolan is very interested in time as a
Mm,
concept.
yeah,
But yeah, for me, that's sort of the big misstep of the movie. Every time I rewatch it, I'm like, oh, I wish this was in chronological order. And now I actually know where to find the version that is re-edited in chronological order. And I think next time I watch this, I'm going to watch the chronological version just to see how the story plays out, and if it's any how the differences affect the overall experience, I guess.
sure, yeah,
Now, I think another issue I had with the story is that there's certain emotional beats that are missed. Now, this is very much no Nolan isn't investing a lot in his characters as sort of fully fleshed out people. They're very much vessels through which the audience can relate to what's going on.
sure, And to tell a
Um,
story through
yeah,
to them to react to things instead of
yeah.
yeah.
But there's still emotional beats that I was missing here. One of my favorite, maybe my favorite aspect of this film is this relationship that forms between Tommy and Gibson, where it's this sort of wordless friendship. It kind of makes me think of like two introverts who are just enjoying each other's company and just like not talking but saying so much despite that,
Yeah.
and the way they come to care about each other.
Hmm.
But there's no ending to that relationship. There's a beginning, there's a middle, but there's no final part. Because after Tommy stands up for Gibson, which is this sort of not triumphant moment, but a moment of this relationship, the importance of it being tested.
Hmm.
Um, and then Gibson dies very unceremoniously, and Tommy doesn't even know that he has died. And not in a they're making a point about it way, but in a oh, you kind of just forget about that
Yeah.
way.
I mean, it's a problem in general with this film. One of the big problems is that specifically for our main soldier characters from the mall, I can't recognize who our characters are because like they're never calling each other by their names. Like
Yeah.
there's really no name calling, and so half of the soldiers I think look alike. I didn't even in my first watch through. I didn't even know that Gibson was the one that died. Um, I get to
Yeah,
the
they
end and I'm like,
obfuscate that a bit.
hmm?
Oh, they obfuscated a bit. It's very difficult, like the way it's shot and edited.
Yeah. And so it's like, oh, is that the one who died? Like, who's this guy at the end? Is that Gibson and Tommy? I don't know. And so upon rewatches, I'm like, oh, Gibson died. Oh, that's a shame. I
Yeah,
thought that was the other guy. Oh, okay.
yeah. There's like because it isn't even Tommy there because it's the ship is filling and everyone gets out of the hull. Except the last two out are not Tommy but Alex, and then
Mm-hmm.
Gibson is still in there, which Alex and Gibson have a different relationship, a more antagonistic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the important relationship here. It's Tommy and Gibson. There should be some kind of acknowledgement of that relationship and some tragedy. Instead, it just kind of happens, and the way it's edited, you're like, oh, I think I should feel bad about this. But if you don't recognize what's going on in that moment,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and if Tommy doesn't know what's going on in that moment, then yeah, it just doesn't land.
Yeah. Which is a real shame.
Yeah. I know. I don't. I also remembered from watching this movie before that I was like, oh yeah, the ship's arriving at Dunkirk. That is like this big emotional moment. It's the climax of the movie, and it's all emotional. But that's not actually when it happens. It happens like there's still 20 minutes left when it
Mm-hmm.
happens. The entire final act happens after the ships arrive. The big triumphant. The ships have arrived. So yeah, it just didn't feel as triumphant as I remembered it because I knew there was still more left in the movie.
It's always the same emotional beat for me every time I watch it.
Okay.
Like it's the highest part of the film for me because I don't know, like the way it's just done, the way the music builds up, the way it's shot, it brings me the tears every time I watch that moment.
Okay.
Um, Even though I know that there's more left, and I do agree that it probably would be better further along the line, but the way that scene is built, I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. I did look in the chronological edit, and it does happen at the same point in the chronological edit because I was curious if they would have bumped it back because I think chronologically it makes sense bumping it back a bit. But I'm not entirely sure when what is happening where.
Sure. Yeah.
But if that's sort of after everyone is rescued from the ship, and then you have Farrier continuing on to Dunkirk, and then you have the ships arriving and him shooting down the plane and then crashing, rather than doing that, the ships arriving 20 minutes earlier before the whole ship sinking and everyone getting saved.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the TLDR for me of the story is that I like each of the individual storylines. There are elements I really like, but the chronology of it and some of the emotional beats don't quite land, and so that kind of brings my score down a bit here. Do you have other thoughts on the story before we?
No, I don't.
Okay, so yeah, I gave it a 2 out of 5. That's maybe a bit harsh, but I think that's what's bringing the experience down for me is the non chronological
Mm-hmm.
structure.
I gave it a 3.2. Um, I am more invested in war films, and so um, the non chronological order structure just makes this stand out. But yeah, I can see the issues, but it's not
Yeah,
that big of an issue for me.
yeah, and who knows if a chronological structure, if that would make my experience any better. I will, if we record any kind of episode later, I'll do an update after I watch the chronological version. But yeah, anyway, on to the characters now. First up, I have Tommy, who is surprisingly compelling for a mostly silent protagonist.
I don't think we ever get his name.
No, this is, I'm taking it from the IMDb here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He's It's interesting talking about this after talking about Dunkirk or Tenet, because I think Tommy here is a blank slate character in a similar way to the protagonist in Tenet, but here it actually works because we can relate more to his goal.
Mm-hmm.
His goal is not save the world from time stuff. His goal here is just survival.
Yeah.
And so we're relating to his goal of survival while we're kind of filling in the details for ourselves. It reminded me especially a lot of like video game protagonists and how video game protagonists are blank slates
Mm-hmm.
in a way that helps you relate to them. And I think part of that is having that relatable goal.
Sure. And also, just it's easier to relate to him because, like, typically you're more familiar with like the history of this versus the fictional world that we get in Tenant, where
Yeah.
you're not used to this whole concept of inverting and the future fighting the past. Here it's like, okay, you've heard for so many years in your history classes and your grandparents talking about the war or something, and so you get an idea for what's happening here, and you can somewhat like not relate but root for the character.
Yeah. I think relate not in like the sense of you understand what he's going through, but in the sense of you are putting yourself in his shoes and imagining yourself
Mm-hmm.
in this situation. And yeah, that he's not heroic. He's not evil. He's not a bad person, but he's motivated by his own survival and later by his and his friend's survival. He's not trying to save the world here. He's trying to get off the beach
Mm-hmm.
and doing so in ways that are occasionally duplicitous, but not, again, not evil. We understand why he's doing the things he's doing. He's pretending to, well, I guess he is actually carrying someone on a stretcher, but trying to use that as a way to get on the ship, and then pretending to have been on the ship when he actually wasn't. And but he's still, we understand. And yeah, I don't know, it never feels like he's doing a horrible thing.
Right. Yeah. He's just doing what any soldier would do in his shoes.
Yeah. And I really like his relationship with Gibson. There's sort of this unspoken connection between the two of them that I just find it so compelling as a as an idea here, that like it's this huge challenge that Nolan is taking on to, can he make the audience care not just about a mostly silent protagonist, but a relationship between two characters that mostly happens in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it works so great
Until the
until
point
the
where
end.
he
Yeah,
kills Gibson, but yeah.
yeah. Until that point, it's just like it's such a compelling relationship, and you understand the connection between the two of them.
Mm.
And I even read in a bit of like queer coding into that. I don't think that's what Nolan intended, but sort of these two people finding this connection, the sort of unspoken connection, and realizing that they are similar. Um, I think Nolan is more sort of seeing the two characters as they're both driven by survival and are willing to be sort of duplicitous for it, but not in a way that ends up hurting people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm fascinated by the character of Tommy. There's a criticism of this movie that because you don't know much about the characters, you there's like an emotional barrier, which for me, I disagree with that. I think even though we don't know the characters' backstories, Nolan does the work of actually getting you to care about these characters through the filmmaking, through the editing, and through the performances as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, you mentioned that the soldiers here all look very similar.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that we never get really any names.
Yeah.
Like I
So
only know Alex is Alex because I read the subtitles.
yeah. Now, I actually was able to tell the characters apart pretty well, and leading up to this, I like when this was coming out, I was watching interviews and paying attention, and yeah, we'll talk about it more when we get to the performances. But Finn Whitehead, who plays Tommy, I sort of watched a lot of interviews with him, and so I knew going in how to spot him in a crowd, and then Harry Styles as well. If you know of him, then you'll be able to pick him out as well here.
Sure.
But if you don't, then yeah, it's just kind of like the character designs are not distinct enough. I mean, I would argue they are pretty distinct, but yeah, especially a first time through, kind of like a Merry and Pippin in Lord of the Rings, where the first time through you're like, which one's Merry, which one's Pippin, and then after your 10th time you're like, why did I ever think these two people looked similar? At least
I
that's
still
that's my
struggle,
experience.
but it was a little better this time.
Yeah, I do think it is. That is one of the things that's rewarding about rewatching this, is getting their arcs a lot clearer
Mm-hmm.
once you're able to distinguish them more. And yeah, speaking of, we should probably actually talk about Gibson. I just find his character so interesting.
Yeah, and it's really disappointing as well.
Yeah, the way it ends, sort of anticlimactically,
Mm-hmm.
because you really do get to care for him, even though even more silent than Tommy is. And yeah, there is this question of, the he is impersonating a British soldier to try and get away. But again, I don't feel like I can't really judge him for that, or I understand why
Right.
he's doing that because of what we've seen. And
Right.
there's
Yeah.
even the way the movie starts kind of gets you in that mindset, because it starts on the streets of Dunkirk, with Tommy escaping from German soldiers who are shooting at him, and he goes through a French barricade, and the French soldiers are sort of looking at him with envy because he gets to leave and they don't.
Mm.
And so that's kind of in the background of the rest of the movie, is this thing of like these British soldiers, even though we aren't seeing the French perspective very much, there is that difference between the British soldiers and the French soldiers and their experiences. And the British, they can go back to Great Britain, they can go back home. The French, this is their home. They don't have any other places to go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, some French soldiers did end up getting rescued here, but there is that difference there. And then you have the character of Gibson, who is sort of personifying that difference, and sort of the injustice and the gray morality of war. And like,
Yeah.
is he there is that question, is he doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Which for me, it's like he's tried to survive as anyone would. But yeah, again, I wish the film gave more weight to his death, because this is what's interesting to me. These two characters and their
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
In war films, or in just war in general, like you can't always expect your favorite characters to survive, and sometimes your main characters will die as well. Um, but typically, when that happens, you have a reaction to the character dying from the other soldiers. Here, because we're in the middle of an immediate action segment, we don't get that. You have risk after risk after risk, and then you completely forget about Gibson by the end, and it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, not only that, but Tommy forgets about Gibson,
Right.
and not in a way where it feels like, oh, that's intentionally the point. Because I could see, oh, he's forgotten about Gibson because this is war and whatever. Or I could even see he's intentionally repressing the memory so he doesn't have to think about it. But no, neither of those things is communicated.
There could have been like a small moment where he's looking around the ship looking for Gibson.
There is a moment when he's in the water where you could interpret him as him looking for Gibson, but there isn't a moment where you see his reaction to realizing Gibson isn't there.
Okay.
So yeah, I feel like there's just, you know 30 seconds missing of just like, how does he find out and how does he process that information?
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I don't know, I find Gibson to be kind of the most compelling character in the movie, in a movie that I think has a ton of compelling characters.
Right.
um and yeah, I just wish that Nolan was as invested in that story as I am,
Mm.
which maybe he is. Maybe there's some other hidden reason, but I don't get the sense that that is the case. I think for Nolan, these characters are kind of a vehicle through which he is telling the story. Whereas for me, I'm more invested in these characters as
Mm-hmm.
characters. Yeah. Other thoughts on Gibson and Tommy?
No.
Next up, we have Alex, who's sort of the third member of their trio here. He's kind of an a-hole.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I get it. He's in the middle of war, but still. he wants to throw Gibson out, even though Gibson has saved him multiple times. Because there's like Gibson's the one who opens the door so that the people can escape from inside the sinking ship, and then he tosses them the tow line so they can get back to shore.
Yeah, Alex. I think he's just a joiner. Like he'll join the faction who has the most power in the situation, and in the situation where he throws Gibson out, he's joining the other group of soldiers as they're the
Yeah,
one mostly antagonizing him.
yeah, I think that that's a fair read, or even sort of he's more. Yeah, I don't know. He's less motivated by his, or not less motivated by his own survival, but there's different considerations for him.
Mm-hmm.
Where for Tommy and Gibson, they're sort of like they're motivated by their own survival and the survival of their friends, whereas Alex is kind of bringing in this nationalistic side of it, and the not only us versus them, but also some of us versus some of us. There's,
Right.
even though the French and the British are allied, he still wants to throw Gibson out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could have been a really interesting thing to dig deeper on, but the film kind of just lets him off the hook. Like there's no reckoning, since Gibson's death is handled so offhandedly. There's no reckoning with any of the things that Alex said.
Mm-hmm.
There's no even conversation between him and Tommy after everything of like, hey, we should talk about what all went down. It's just kind of like the movie has moved on, and therefore the characters have also moved on. But yeah, for me, I'm just like, I want to stay with this and dig in deeper in this, like these interpersonal relationships and the messiness of it. I want to see
Yeah.
the movie kind of get into that with these three characters specifically. I think there's a different trio of characters where it gets into that more.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thoughts on Alex, or just kind of
I mean, he shows up halfway through the film,
yeah,
and I kind of lose track of him once the whole sinking ship happens. So,
okay, yeah. I think it's interesting that Nolan cast Harry Styles, which according to Nolan, and I buy it. Nolan has said that he had no idea who Harry Styles was. But I think in casting Harry Styles in this role, it's there's it makes that character, for anyone who knows Harry Styles, more memorable. And then it also sort of the turn he has where he kind of turns on Gibson, that feels like a commentary on Harry Styles' sort of image as like, oh, he's the nice pop star. So to then have him doing this sort of more morally dubious things, or yeah, yeah, I don't know. I do definitely buy that Christopher Nolan would not have any idea who One Direction or Harry Styles were.
sure,
But I
yeah.
think there is something interesting in that casting decision there that worked really well for me. Obviously, I don't think you're particularly familiar with Harry Styles or One Direction.
I know that people keep talking about him, but I don't really know.
Yeah, we'll talk about him more in the performance section, but yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, next up we have the C characters with Mr. Dawson. Do
Mm-hmm.
you know the backstory for this character? Like,
No, not really.
so he's based on Charles Lightoller, who was a former second officer on the Titanic, was the highest ranking person on the Titanic to survive, and the person who, by all accounts, was most strictly enforcing the women and children first.
Hmm.
So he actually he is in James Cameron's Titanic movie as well.
Okay.
And then this actual real life historical figure did go and save people from Dunkirk. So just kind of, even though the characters here are fictional, I do find it interesting the little connections that Nolan makes to real life people.
I mean, generally, that's what you want to do with a war film is
Yeah,
find a connected story.
yeah. And I think there's some really good depth to Dawson as a character. He's probably the character we find out the most about, just in terms of like backstory. And it's revealed slowly in a way that I found really effective. Because at the start, you basically know he has a yacht and he knows how to sail it and he wants to help. But then as the film goes on, you find out about um, his son and that sort of the story there,
Mm-hmm.
and how he feels sort of this additional responsibility to help and to save people because of that. And then yeah, he's just one of those characters that he knows what he's doing. He knows how to help and he wants to help, and he just kind of, that's what he's going to do in the movie.
Yeah.
I am curious if this stood out to you on rewatch. I realized there's a moment where he makes a decision. This is after George has fallen down the stairs, but before he's died, where Dawson makes the decision to continue on to Dunkirk. Did that moment jump out to you at all?
It was a tiny moment. I think it jumped out to me on previous rewatches, but not so much this one. I
Yeah.
think for me the moment that stood out of a similar decision is the one with Ferrier. We'll talk about him later on when he decides to go after the bomber instead of going straight on to Dunkirk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this interesting question, and I think I'm curious because Nolan obviously doesn't dive into what the reasoning behind this decision is. But yeah, that is sort of this moment that I recognize that I hadn't really realized before what that was, the sort of significance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, we know based on what happens in the rest of the film that like George wouldn't have survived even if they had turned back.
Right. From that, at the point of that film, when that happens, I I figured that's like, oh, they already went far enough away that they're probably halfway across. Like it's gonna be
Yeah,
about the same either way, so probably not
yeah,
turn back.
yeah. Now speaking of George, he's
George.
an interesting character in that he's just kind of made so that you feel bad for him when he dies.
Yeah.
And it's really effective because this is a movie with a lot of characters, so you kind of have to have things sort of shorthand. He's George is just like, oh, he just wants to help and he wants to have his name in the paper saying that he did something,
Right.
and that's his sort of his dream. Not the paper as in like the national, no, just the local paper. He just wants to do something good enough for the local paper. Yeah, I don't know. I always feel bad for him. I'm always like, when I rewatch, don't get on the boat, George. Don't get on the boat. They don't need you. You can stay home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame too because like his accident is kind of small, really. Like
Yeah,
we don't see him fall down the stairs or hit his head. It's just like, oh, he's gone. Oh, he's injured. Oh, okay. Well, that's a shame. And then he's dead, and it's like, oh, well, that's the bigger shame.
Yeah, and this is where it does kind of, to me, this is why I feel where I feel it gets a bit more, a bit less literal, and a bit more poetic in sort of George's story here, where this is the part where it starts to feel like, okay, Nolan is sort of exploring these bigger ideas using this smaller story of sort of the collateral damage of war. Yeah, I don't know. There isn't a ton to George's character besides just the tragedy of what happens to him.
Yeah.
Now there is a bit more complexity to Peter, who's the other. This is Dawson's son,
Mm-hmm.
who I really like his arc here. I think this is for me the for as disappointed as I am with the Tommy and Gibson and Alex sort of their trio, the Peter, Dawson, and the soldier, their trio I think has a really interesting ending to their story. Because Peter is obviously horrified when the soldier pushes George, well, not pushes, it's an accident, but
Mm-hmm.
um and sort of blames him for it and is trying to make him feel more guilty that he already does. Like the soldier asks, "Is he going to be okay?" No, it's all your fault. I don't know if he says those exact words, but that's the sort of what he's saying.
Right.
But then we have the turn where something in Peter's sort of worldview changes, and this is after he finds out that George has died. And the soldier asks him, "Will he be okay?" And Peter lies and says yes, because he realizes both it was an accident, and also this soldier isn't going to be able to, like, that guilt is going to eat him up for the rest of his life. So
Right.
better to pretend for this moment. Yeah, I don't know. I just found that so interesting as like this decision that this character has to make. Yeah, I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on any of that?
Um. No, you said everything.
You have to butt in and say what you think here.
I have to butt in and say what I think. Uh. Well, we have Killian Murphy's character, the shell shocked soldier, which is it's a tragedy that he kills someone, especially an
Yeah,
innocent. It's a sad ending as well, as he spots the kid in the little
yeah,
stretcher at the end of the film, but we don't really
yeah,
see too much afterwards. He kind of disappears into the crowd.
yeah. I think that ambiguity is interesting because you don't know if he knows that it is George on
Mm-hmm.
the stretcher, but that sort of like the final cruel turn of fate, that even though Peter has given this lie, that it might have been for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the this is an unnamed soldier, the shell shocked soldier, or I think the credits list him as the shivering soldier.
Maybe.
All of them kind of tongue twisters to say, but
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, Killian Murphy's character, his arc is also kind of interesting, though it happens, as we were saying, it happens kind of off screen, where he starts off, he's a little bit stuck up when we first meet him, or lacking sort of empathy for the people around him, because he's on a lifeboat that has shown up. They were chasing after the ship that got torpedoed, and Alex and Tommy are in the water. trying to get on the lifeboat, and Cillian Murphy's character says, "No, there's no space on the lifeboat. We'll come back for you."
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're not going to. Um, and that's when Gibson sort of throws them the rope and lets them ride back behind the boat. But and then the next time chronologically you see him is he's on the wreck of a ship. He's the only survivor and is just traumatized by everything that has happened since the last time we saw him.
Well, chronologically, you do that order.
Yeah,
Him being traumatized is the
chronologically.
first time we actually see him in the film.
Yes. But yeah, for his character arc here, that's what I'm tracking here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there's this line that Mark Rylance says that he's not himself, he may never be again. The sort of like the loss, not just the death, but
The mentality.
yeah. And yeah, I don't know. I found it a very effective portrayal of PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the way it manifests and how it impacts the rest of the story and everything that happens to George.
Mm-hmm. Especially when later on in the film you get to see Tommy and Gibson survive a sinking ship,
Yeah.
and like you could probably cross the dots and figure it was like, okay, well that's probably a similar thing that happened to him. So that's where the
Yeah.
trauma gets in. And that's a truly terrifying moment, especially
Yeah.
like you're underwater, you're in the dark, you don't know where to go.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. This is, I find all of this so interesting, which is where I get back to the whole non chronological order of everything. Is it's like all of these interesting ideas and these character arcs and all of these things, but then it's all getting scrambled up by this non chronological order, and we're missing connections
Mm.
because of it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Cillian Murphy's character.
And then of course we have the pilots.
Yes, Farrier, who he's the one. Collins doesn't get much to do.
Yeah.
He's just he crashes and then is the connection back to the Dawson plot line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, Farrier, even though you don't get much of a sense for his character, you still get enough.
Right. Um, for me, with war stories, I think what the one thing that war stories can get away with that other things really can't is a lack of deep characters. Because here, like you understand the situation they're going in.
Yeah,
You're not here to learn more about the characters in their personal lives. You're there to see them get to the end of it. You want to see
yeah,
them survive in the end. You don't really care if they like donuts or something. And so here, I for here, like I can care about Farrier just because he's in this situation and not know anything about him.
yeah, yeah. And I think part of he isn't my favorite character in the film, and I
Mm,
think part of that is just that I don't find his storyline, like I find it interesting, this idea of, the pilot with the low fuel gauge, but so much of his storyline is the dogfights, which are really well shot, but from a character perspective there isn't a ton of interesting character work being done in those moments. So yeah, I find that storyline a little less compelling, which is maybe why I find his character as a whole a little less compelling. But yeah, I mean, I don't dislike the character. I think his character is the one where what Nolan wants to do with the character matches most with what my experience of the character was, which is that he's a vessel through which the plot is, or through which the story happens.
Yeah.
um where, you aren't supposed to be super invested in him. He's just there so that you can see what's going on.
Sure.
And maybe you do get a little bit invested in him, but not any more than Nolan is invested in him. Yeah. Then Collins, we kind of already addressed him.
Yeah.
The last sort of major character we have is Commander Bolton, who's the Kenneth Branagh character, who's on the mole for all of the movie, I think. I
Yeah.
guess he goes to the beach at one point, or maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But yeah, he's. I was reading that he's sort of intended to be the Greek chorus of this movie, where he's almost narrating what is happening.
Okay.
At sort of important moments, he's explaining, you know, he'll say something like, "We need to keep the mole open so that ships can arrive." So then you get, okay, now I understand what's going on here. Or he'll say, "We Churchill has abandoned us. He only wants to get 30,000 people off the beach. And I have 400,000 people here. So okay, now we understand the scale of the conflict." I really like that added perspective here. And that it's not intrusive, but instead sort of it adds that context without taking up too much space. And being someone who is directly involved with the conflict, it's not, cutting back to London where Winston Churchill is in the situation room. I guess I don't know what the British equivalent of the situation room is. Talking on the phone to someone. No, it's someone who is actually there and is actually experiencing these things, but has the broader perspective to let the audience know the context of what's going on.
Right.
But yeah, in that sense, he's less of a character and more of a function within the film. But he does have this great character moment where um, the evacuation is in progress and there's a boat leaving. All of the officers are leaving on this boat and they're going down the ladder, and then Bolton closes. There's like a little gate. He shuts the gate and says, "I'm waiting until the French get saved." And just such a wonderful moment of heroism.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know that I find it very touching that, like, I don't know how to describe it entirely. The connection he feels despite sort of the national differences. And sort of we've been told by, Churchill doesn't care about the French. So, and yet Commander Bolton does, and that sort of empathy and defiant empathy maybe is a good way to put it. And I think that's also what I find interesting about Tommy's character, Tommy and Gibson and their relationship, that sort of defiant empathy. And Bolton is inspired by the real life figure Captain Bill Tennant, who he was not the commander on the Mole, but he actually did stay at Dunkirk until the last ship left. Um, so yeah, again, a connection to a historical figure that is sort of interesting to read about. Did you have any thoughts on Commander Bolton?
No, I don't have much to add.
I feel like I connected to the characters more strongly than you did. Is that fair to say?
I mean, sure. I think it's also for me. I don't pay close attention to characters in a war story.
Okay.
Like I'm there. I root for them to survive,
Yeah.
but that's about it. I don't think of them as like, oh, I'm more interested in knowing more about them and their personality. No, I'm there to root for them, and that's about it.
Yeah. I think it is interesting rewatching this and how much the characters stood out to me this time around. Where, because a common criticism of Dunkirk is that it isn't invested enough in its characters. And I think that is sort of, yeah, I think the movie could put a little bit more thought into the characters, but I do think the characters are rich and complex, even though a lot of them don't get much focus.
Sure.
So yeah, I gave the characters a 4.5 out of 5. I think spectacular. I think the issues again I have with it are the non chronological, story issues, not with the characters.
Hmm. And I gave it a 3.
So next up we have the visuals.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean it's a Nolan film, especially these late period Nolan films.
Yeah,
Just always look really good.
they look really good. I just love the different shots of the beach and the foam and the different helmets and just establishing shots of just what's going on there. It looks so good. It just looks very pretty.
Yeah, it doesn't look like any other war film. I think both the fact that it is happening on a beach, it's a beach episode, and also that it is sort of, it's Nolan's visual style, so it's very muted and overcast.
Yeah, like most war stories take place in like the crumbled ruins of a city or in the forest or in fields.
Yeah,
Here it's like we're on the beach where not much is going on. We're on a ship. It's pretty interesting.
yeah, and I think the effects work here is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of very complex stuff going on here, and the fact that they used minimal CG is very impressive,
Mm-hmm.
because you have ships sinking and bombs going off and hundreds of extras that are, some of them are cardboard. Yeah, it's really cool. And you
You
even
got
get
the
the,
ship. You got the planes.
yeah, and even like not just the ship, but you have actual ships that were at Dunkirk, um in the scene where all of the ships are arriving, there are actual people who, or boats that were involved in the rescue operation.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of cool, and that's the kind of thing that a director like Nolan can pull off, where other directors probably wouldn't get the budget or the leeway to do that. So yeah, I really like the visuals. I think very very solid visuals here.
Yeah. I. They always look nice. I like they. I mean, they captured my attention just from the initial teaser trailer. I
Yeah.
mean, that teaser trailer. I just love that trailer so much. But yeah, no, just the look definitely caught my attention,
Yeah. I gave the visuals a 4.5 out of 5.
and I give it a 4.
So next up we have the performances.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a large cast here. Um it, Nolan sort of wanted to cast young, unknown actors. Um, so we have in sort of the major role, we have Finn Whitehead playing Tommy, who was pretty much plucked from obscurity. He only had one credited role before Dunkirk. He was actually in 2015 working at a coffee shop. So the very short time frame between, working class person looking for an acting job to starring in a Christopher Nolan movie.
Right.
Um, and then also just like random side note, but he's named after the Irish folklore hero who has the best name ever, Finn McCool. Which, if your name is McCool, no, it's spelled very differently because it's an Irish name, but just love that name. And yeah, I think he does a very good job. It's a weird role
Right.
because he's basically looking stern while going from one place to another. But there is a lot of sort of physicality to it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, being compelling while being having a more stoic expression like that is a difficult thing to do. And obviously a lot of that is down to the editing and the cinematography, but I do think his performance is still very, very good.
I
Yeah,
don't
we
have a
have.
lot to say about the performances in general
Yeah,
because
I kind of figured.
I mean a lot of it is just doing scenes without dialogue, which is cool,
Yeah.
but I can't really speak much about it.
Yeah. We have Aniran Barnard is playing Gibson, who's actually he's a Welsh actor playing a French character. Um, but yeah, obviously he doesn't have many lines, so it doesn't really register all that much. But yeah, his connection with Finn Whitehead, you feel that connection between them. And then yeah, the third person in their trio is Harry Styles, who of course former member of One Direction, who apparently Nolan had no idea when he cast him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think his casting works well here. I think his chops as an actor are less so this movie. I think having seen him in other movies, mainly Don't Worry, Darling, I think is the title, the Olivia Wilde film from last year, which I like more than some people like, but I don't particularly like it.
Mm-hmm.
And Harry Styles in that one is sort of, you're like, oh yeah, he's not a great actor. So I was seeing more of that going back to Dunkirk, having seen him in a different film. Like, oh yeah, I can see kind of the why it didn't jump out during Dunkirk, which is asking less of him as an actor, I think, than
Sure.
at least on like an emotional, it's still a difficult performance to pull off, and I think he does a fine job of it. But he doesn't have a ton of big emotional moments here. And the one moment of him in the ship, I don't, not my favorite performance in the film of him sort of calling out Gibson. Yeah, the rest of the cast, I mean, we have quite a few people who have gone on to do sort of have interesting careers. We have Tom Glynn Carney, who plays Peter here. He's on House of the Dragon. Jack Lowden, he's done quite a bit. He's a British actor who has done quite a bit of things. Barry Keoghan of the Young cast is probably the biggest breakout here. He's an Irish actor who he had been in several films before this, but this was definitely his biggest role to this point. But since Dunkirk, he's become a huge name, big up and coming star. You would know him. He plays Joker in The Batman.
He's also a character in Eternals.
Yes, he plays reuniting with Harry Styles, although I don't think they share any scenes.
Mm.
Harry Styles, of course, showed up in the end credit scene of Eternals. And yeah, he got Barry Keoghan got an Oscar nomination just earlier this year for Banshees of Inisherin. A very, very good performance. Yeah, this is very much he sort of has two modes as an actor, and one of them is this Dunkirk mode where he's more of like, oh, he's the sweet innocent person, and then he's much more known for being like the Joker side of like slightly unhinged.
Hmm.
But yeah, he does a really good job here in Dunkirk. I can definitely see why he's one of the breakouts. And yeah, we have a lot of sort of bigger name actors as well. Mark Rylance plays Mr. Dawson. He's an iconic British actor who had recently won an Oscar when Dunkirk came out. He
Mm-hmm.
won for Bridge of Spies for Best Supporting Actor in 2016. Um, yeah, he has since sort of become a bigger name in the US in addition to obviously being a huge name in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And he I think gives the best performance in the movie, though he also has the role that is written the most complexly.
Mm-hmm.
We also have Kenneth Branagh. This is his first time working with Nolan. Obviously, goes on to become a pretty familiar face within Nolan movies.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Cillian Murphy and Tom Hardy both sort of team players with Nolan,
Mm-hmm.
doing supporting roles, very important supporting roles, but kind of coming in and filling in those roles. And then we have the voice of Michael Caine as Fortis Leader, the um, plane pilot who crashes that we don't see.
Right. Yeah.
So just kind of a fun way of working him in, since he is often in Nolan films up until Oppenheimer. I think is he was in most Nolan films.
Yes.
The performances are all pretty solid here, but yeah, there isn't a ton to say about them as performances.
Right.
So yeah, I gave the performances a 4 out of 5.
And I also give it a 4 out of 5.
Now, last up, we have the sound,
Yes.
which I assume you have thoughts on the score.
I mean the score is very good. It's not my favorite of Zimmer's Nolan scores, but it still does a really good job, and the score plays a really good part in building up to the small boats coming into the rescue, which is
Yeah,
very emotional. It also really helps build the tension of the scenes when they're running. I love the sound of the ticking clock in the background
yeah,
as things either amp up or start to slow down a bit. It's always tense the entire
yeah,
time, even like when it's calm. It's tense, and it does a really good job. In terms of like the specific sound effects, there wasn't really much that stood out as other films. Like Oppenheimer, the explosion, the silence really stands out. Here, it's all good. It all does the job, but nothing stand out ish.
Yeah, I think by just being a war film, the sound is very impressive in how the sound plays such a key role in everything,
Mm-hmm.
and the sound effects especially. Yeah, the score, I like the score. I don't, I'm not as huge a fan of it as some people are, but I think it really works for what the film is trying to do.
Yeah,
I would never listen to it separate from the film.
I mean, I do when I listen when I do homework, but that's about it.
Okay, that kind of, for me, that's like too tense for that. Although I do sometimes listen to horror movie soundtracks when I
Sure.
do stuff,
Yeah.
so I guess I not really a good comparison. But
Hmm.
I am curious. You said on the Tenet episode that you often have like one song that's a standout from each score. Do you have one for Dunkirk?
Um, I don't remember the name, but like generally just whenever it's that it like starts to tense up. So in situations where um towards the end when they're in the oil and they have to escape and
Yeah,
like we're hoping he shoots down the plane or we hope the characters get out. A lot of it is the same, but I can't tell you I can't pull out one specific track. Maybe it was the submarine. I don't remember. But yeah, most of it's good.
yeah. No, I will say there is some muffled dialogue here. Definitely not
It's
as bad
mostly
as
with the
Tenet.
pilots,
Yeah,
which is understandable.
that's Nolan likes it when you can't hear what Tom Hardy is saying. Apparently,
Yeah, but
or maybe it's more that.
it's not as poorly muffled
Yeah,
as other stuff, but it's muffled. But you could mostly hear it
yeah.
or
I think I
discern it.
remember. Yeah, I think I remember having an issue with it in the theater, but watching it at home, I had the subtitles on. So
Yeah, it's fine at home. Like it definitely is gonna be fine at home. I don't remember the theater experience, but yeah.
yeah, I gave the sound a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's good all around, but I am bringing down some points for the muffled dialogue, even though it isn't as bad as Tenet. Like Tenet is the bottom of the barrel, and this is above that, but it's still not quite where I would want it to be.
And for me, it's a 3.5 because it's solid all around, but it doesn't have that one wow factor to make it stand out.
Yeah, yeah. No, that leaves my final score here as a 18.5 out of 25, which is a 74% or a 3.7 on our 5-star scale.
And I have a 17.7, which is a 70.80%, or a 3.54 5-star rating.
Yeah. So this is for both of us, landing in between Oppenheimer and Tenet on our
Mm-hmm.
Nolan rankings. A bit higher for me than it is for you, but yeah, I think that is definitely accurate.
Yeah, it's definitely accurate, and we'll definitely see where it lands once we get the other films. I think looking back, it's probably going to end up being on the lower end of Nolan films, but it's still a really good
Okay.
film.
Yeah, I think that will be true for my rankings as well. I did want a quick shout out that this is in my Barbie movie rankings, because why not? We forgot to do
Okay,
this for Tenet, but
I
this is
guess.
sort of, um, yeah, kind of lower half in between Video Game Hero and The Pink Shoes for me. So, not too high for, but still among sort of the Barbie movies that I like.
Okay.
Um, and for you, that this falls more in the Let me see here. Yeah, this is more in the top half for you, sort of Big City, Big Dreams, Mermaid Tale, that sort of range of things.
Okay.
Original, the not original, but the new Barbie movie as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of funny to compare our scores here to the Barbie scores.
Sure.
See if Barbie. What did we say? Was it Barbie in Dunkirk?
Yeah, Barbie in Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Why
What
not?
would Barbie's role in the Dunkirk movie be? She would probably be the pilot.
Probably. Maybe.
Yeah, because she's too young to be Mr. Dawson.
She could be George. Or no,
I
Skipper can be
no.
George.
Yeah. Well, if Skipper is George, then Barbie has to be Mr. Dawson, and then that means that who would be Peter? Probably. I feel like Peter is more of a skipper. So
So
Chelsea would be George. Chelsea has to be George.
and Stacy is the shivering soldier.
Stacy just isn't involved. Stacy is off to the side like she always is, because for some reason
Okay.
she's always getting the short end of the stick when it comes to.
She's getting her own film, so
Yeah. Hopefully that gives Stacy her due. I don't know. We
hopefully.
haven't seen all of the TV shows yet, but that is something that is coming up for us. We are,
Yes.
in addition to continuing our Nolan podcast and then an upcoming series that we will reveal in due time.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to be doing 2 bonus episodes a month. Um, Later this month, we will be doing an episode on Barbie, the Toys That Made Us. The documentary about the history of Barbie.
Yeah,
That won't be a normal review. That'll just kind of be us talking about Barbie as a figure.
sure. Maybe a little bit about how the documentary has made itself, but sure, yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a discussion, but not as poignant or
Not a review, a discussion, not a
sure.
review.
Yeah, not as detailed as
Yeah.
this.
And then after that, we will be diving into the web series Barbie Life in the Dream House, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I believe, still available on YouTube, but it is also available on Netflix.
Yes,
Well, we'll have to decide which order to go in. We'll discuss that later.
we'll discuss that later. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to follow us on social media. We're Binging Barbie Podcast on Instagram, at Binging Barbie on Twitter, and Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast on Letterboxd, where you can find lists of all of our rankings. Next time for Nolan, we'll be talking about Interstellar. Thank you all for watching.